Private Jessica Kane stood in the medical examination room at Marine Corps Bootcamp, forced to remove her shirt for the mandatory physical inspection, while three male drill sergeants watched and made crude jokes about the little girl who thinks she can be a Marine. What they saw on her back made the room fall dead silent, a tattoo that only 12 people in the entire U.S. military were authorized to wear, the symbol of the most classified special operations unit that officially didn't exist. Have you ever been judged so completely wrong that the truth left people speechless? Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden beneath the most innocent appearances. Jessica Marie Kane looked exactly like what Marine Corps Recruit Depot Paris Island expected from an 18-year-old female recruit from suburban Denver, Colorado. Blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders when it wasn't pulled back in regulation style, blue eyes that seemed almost too bright for military service, and a slender build that made drill sergeants question whether she had the physical strength for Marine training. Her enlistment paperwork showed a typical American teenager's background. Graduated from Jefferson High School with a 3.8 GPA, captain of the debate team, volunteer at a local animal shelter, and acceptance letters to 3 different colleges that she'd turned down to join the Marines. Her parents were listed as Robert Kane, insurance agent, and Michelle Kane, elementary school teacher. No military family history, no prior service connections, no red flags that would suggest anything other than an idealistic young woman who'd watched too many recruiting videos. What the paperwork didn't show was that none of it was true. Jessica Kane was actually Captain Elena Vasquez, a 23-year-old veteran of the most classified military operations conducted by the United States in the past decade. Her real service record was buried so deep in Pentagon databases that it required presidential authorization to access. The suburban Denver background was a carefully constructed cover identity designed to hide her participation in missions that officially never happened. But maintaining that cover meant enduring 3 weeks of boot camp hell while pretending to be a naive teenager who'd never held a weapon or experienced military discipline. The harassment had started on day 1 when Drill Sergeant Thompson saw her step off the bus looking like a college freshman who'd taken a wrong turn. "Well, well," he'd announced loudly enough for the entire platoon to hear. "Looks like Barbie decided to join the Marines. Hope you brought your makeup kit, Princess, because you're going to need it when we're done with you." The nickname stuck. For 3 weeks, Jessica had been called everything from Barbie to Princess to college girl by drill sergeants who seemed determined to prove that pretty blonde girls had no place in Marine training. They'd made her carry extra weight during marches, assigned her to the most degrading cleanup duties, and subjected her to verbal abuse that crossed every line of professional conduct. During physical training, Drill Sergeant Martinez would make comments about her body that were both inappropriate and designed to humiliate her in front of male recruits. "Look at Princess trying to do push-ups," he'd shout. "Maybe if she spent less time on her appearance and more time in the gym, she could actually complete a real workout." Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had developed a particular talent for sexual harassment disguised as training feedback. "Kane, the enemy isn't going to go easy on you because you're pretty. Maybe you should have joined the Air Force if you wanted to keep your nails clean." The worst part wasn't the harassment itself. Jessica had endured far worse during actual combat operations, but the fact that she couldn't respond with her real capabilities. Every instinct told her to demonstrate the advanced fighting techniques she'd mastered, the weapons expertise that made her one of the most lethal operatives in U.S. Special Forces, or the leadership skills that had led successful missions in hostile territory. Instead, she had to play the role of Jessica Kane, struggling with basic exercises, intimidated by aggressive instructors, and gradually improving at a pace that seemed realistic for an untrained civilian. The acting was exhausting. During weapons training, she had to deliberately miss targets that she could have hit blindfolded. Drill sergeants demonstrated hand-to-hand combat techniques. She had to pretend she'd never seen them before, despite having refined those same moves through years of special operations training. Most challenging of all, she had to accept verbal abuse and sexual harassment without revealing that she'd killed enemy combatants who'd shown her more respect than her own instructors. Her cover mission was simple in concept, but complex in execution. Intelligence agencies had identified a security leak within Marine training protocols that was providing enemy forces with detailed information about new recruit backgrounds, capabilities, and eventual assignments. Someone with access to recruit files was selling information that allowed hostile forces to target promising young Marines before they could complete advanced training. Captain Elena Vasquez had volunteered to go undercover as Jessica Kane to identify the leak and gather evidence that could be used to prosecute whoever was compromising Marine security. Her special operations background made her uniquely qualified for deep cover work, but it also made the role of helpless recruit almost unbearable. The investigation had been progressing slowly but successfully. Jessica had identified 3 drill sergeants and 2 administrative personnel who had access to recruit information and demonstrated behavioral patterns consistent with security breaches. She documented inappropriate conduct, recorded conversations, and gathered evidence that would support criminal prosecution. Everything was going according to plan until the mandatory medical inspection that would reveal the one aspect of her cover identity that couldn't be disguised. The tattoo covering her back was both her greatest achievement and her most dangerous liability. It marked her as a member of Unit 731, an elite special operations team so classified that its existence was denied by every government agency. Only 12 people had ever been authorized to wear the tattoo, and all of them were supposed to be invisible to conventional military structures. The design itself was deceptively simple. A series of coordinates that marked the location of the most successful classified operation in U.S. military history, surrounded by symbols that identified specific mission parameters and tactical capabilities. To most people, it looked like an abstract geometric pattern. To someone with the right security clearance and operational knowledge, it was immediately recognizable as marking one of the most dangerous people in the American military. Jessica had considered every possible way to avoid the medical inspection, but missing it would have blown her cover and compromised the investigation. She'd hoped that the examining physician and supervising drill sergeants wouldn't recognize the tattoo's significance, but as she stood in the medical examination room, she realized that hope had been overly optimistic. Commander Harrison Blake was conducting surprise inspections of recruit training protocols as part of a Pentagon review of bootcamp effectiveness. He'd arrived unannounced at Paris Island with authority to observe any aspect of training he considered relevant to his assessment. When he'd decided to witness the medical inspection process, Jessica knew her cover was about to be blown in the most spectacular way possible. Commander Blake had spent 15 years in Marine Special Operations before transferring to intelligence analysis. His security clearance was high enough to know about Unit 731, even if he'd never worked directly with the team. More importantly, he'd attempted to qualify for the unit 3 times and been rejected each time due to psychological assessments that questioned his to handle the extreme stress of deep cover operations. Now, he was about to discover that an 18-year-old recruit named Jessica Kane had already achieved what he'd spent years trying to earn. "Kane," Drill Sergeant Thompson barked, "medical inspection requires removal of all clothing above the waist. Move it along, Princess." Jessica began unbuttoning her uniform shirt with hands that remained steady despite knowing that her mission was about to end. She'd endured 3 weeks of harassment and investigation to reach this point, and now a routine medical procedure would reveal everything. "Jesus Christ," Drill Sergeant Martinez muttered as Jessica removed her shirt. "Look at all that ink. What kind of teenage girl gets a tattoo covering her entire back?" The tattoo was indeed extensive, running from the base of her neck to her lower back and spreading across both shoulder blades. The coordinates were etched in precise military notation, while the surrounding symbols formed patterns that seemed to shift and flow depending on the viewing angle. Commander Blake stepped forward for a closer examination, his expression changing from casual observation to intense focus as he began to recognize elements of the design. "Kane," he said quietly, "where did you get this tattoo?" Jessica maintained her cover persona, acting confused and slightly defensive. "Sir, it's just artwork. I got it for my 18th birthday." Blake studied the coordinates more carefully, running calculations in his head as he recognized the pattern. The numbers corresponded to a location in Eastern Europe where Unit 731 had conducted its most famous operation, the extraction of a high-value intelligence asset from behind enemy lines during a mission that had been so successful it changed international intelligence protocols. "These coordinates," Blake said, his voice carrying growing suspicion, "do you know what they represent?" "No, sir." The tattoo artist said they were random numbers that looked cool. Blake pulled out his phone and began entering the coordinates into a secure mapping application. The location that appeared made his face go pale, a small village in Romania where 12 American operatives had eliminated an entire enemy intelligence network while extracting a defector who provided information that prevented 3 terrorist attacks. The mission had been so classified that Blake had only learned about it through intelligence briefings that came with warnings about discussing the operation with anyone lacking specific authorization. According to every official record, the operatives involved in that mission were known only by designation numbers, their real identities buried in files that required presidential approval to access. "Drill Sergeant Thompson," Blake said, his voice carefully controlled, "I need you and Sergeant Martinez to step outside for a moment." "Sir?" "Now, and close the door behind you." The 2 drill sergeants exchanged confused glances, but followed orders, leaving Blake alone with Jessica in the medical examination room. The silence stretched for nearly a minute as Blake continued studying the tattoo while Jessica maintained her pose of confused innocence. "Kane," Blake said finally, "I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I need you to answer honestly. Are you who your enlistment papers say you are?" Jessica calculated her options rapidly. Her cover was blown, but she could still potentially salvage the investigation if she handled the situation correctly. Blake's security clearance meant he could be trusted with classified information, but revealing her true identity would require ending the mission before she'd gathered enough evidence to prosecute the security leak. "Sir, I'm not sure what you're asking." Blake walked around to face her directly, his expression carrying the intensity of someone who'd spent years in special operations and recognized when he was being lied to. "I'm asking whether Jessica Kane from Denver, Colorado actually exists, or whether I'm looking at Captain Elena Vasquez of Unit 731. The use of her real name and unit designation ended any possibility of maintaining her cover." Jessica straightened into military posture that revealed years of advanced training. "Sir, how do you know that designation?" "Because I spent 3 years trying to qualify for that unit," Blake replied. "And because I recognize the tattoo that marks successful completion of the Romanian operation." Jessica made the decision that would determine whether her 3 weeks of investigation had been worthwhile. "Sir, I'm conducting a classified operation that requires maintaining my cover identity." Blake's expression shifted from suspicion to professional respect as he realized he was speaking to someone whose operational experience exceeded his own. "Captain, what kind of classified operation requires you to endure bootcamp harassment while pretending to be a teenage recruit?" "The kind that identifies security leaks in Marine training protocols, sir." Blake processed this information quickly, understanding the implications. "You're investigating someone with access to recruit information." "Yes, sir. And my mission parameters require maintaining cover until sufficient evidence has been gathered to support prosecution." Blake looked at the tattoo again, noting details that confirmed her claim. The symbols surrounding the coordinates indicated mission parameters that only someone with direct operational experience would know. The precise placement and artistic quality suggested military rather than civilian tattooing. Most convincingly, The overall design incorporated elements that were classified above his security clearance, meaning Jessica had access to information that marked her as genuinely elite special operations. Captain, how much evidence have you gathered? Enough to identify 3 potential suspects, but not enough to determine which one represents the actual security breach. Blake made a decision that would affect both their careers. What do you need to complete the mission? Jessica was surprised by the offer of assistance, but recognized an opportunity to accelerate her investigation. I need access to communication logs for personnel with recruit file access, and I need to continue my cover identity long enough to document actual security violations. The communication logs I can provide, Blake said, but your cover is blown with me. How do you plan to maintain it with drill sergeants who just witnessed this conversation? Jessica had already considered this problem. Sir, if you're willing to participate in the operation, we can use your discovery of my tattoo to create a scenario that maintains my cover while providing access to the information I need. Blake was intrigued by the operational planning that Jessica was developing in real time. Explain. You recognize the tattoo as indicating prior military service, but you don't know the specifics. You're concerned about recruits with undisclosed backgrounds, so you order a complete background investigation that gives me access to personnel files and communication systems. Blake understood immediately. I conduct the investigation myself, which provides you with access to classified systems while maintaining the appearance that you're being investigated rather than investigating. Exactly, sir. And the drill sergeants who've been harassing me will assume that my mysterious background makes me more dangerous than they realized, which should reduce the harassment and allow me to complete the mission more effectively. Blake admired the tactical thinking that allowed Jessica to turn a blown cover into an operational advantage. Captain, how long do you need to complete the investigation? With access to communication logs and personnel files, I can identify the security leak within 72 hours. Blake made his decision. Put your shirt back on, Captain. We're about to give the drill sergeants a story that will change how they treat you while providing cover for your real mission. Jessica dressed quickly, then stood at attention while Blake prepared to resume his role as a commander who discovered something unexpected about a recruit's background. Blake opened the door and called the drill sergeants back into the room. Thompson and Martinez entered with expressions that suggested they'd been speculating about the private conversation they'd witnessed. Gentlemen, Blake announced, we have a situation that requires immediate attention and absolute discretion. Sir? Recruit Kane's tattoo indicates prior military service that wasn't disclosed in her enlistment paperwork. I'm ordering a complete background investigation to determine whether we're dealing with fraudulent enlistment or classified service that requires special handling. Thompson and Martinez exchanged glances, suddenly realizing that the recruit they'd been calling Princess might represent a serious security issue. Sir, Thompson asked, what are our instructions regarding Kane? She's restricted to base pending completion of the investigation. No further harassment, no special treatment, and absolutely no discussion of this situation with anyone lacking appropriate security clearance. Blake's tone carried enough authority to ensure compliance, while his choice of words suggested that Jessica represented a potential threat rather than an ongoing investigation. Sir, should we inform the other recruits? Negative. Kane continues normal training while I conduct the background investigation. Any deviation from standard protocol could compromise the investigation. Blake turned to Jessica, playing his role perfectly. Kane, you'll report to my office at 0800 tomorrow for the beginning of a comprehensive background review. Until then, you continue normal recruit activities. Yes, sir, Jessica replied, maintaining her pose of nervous uncertainty. After the drill sergeants left, Blake provided Jessica with access codes and communication protocols that would allow her to conduct her investigation while appearing to be the subject of Blake's inquiry. Captain, he said quietly, you have 72 hours to identify the security leak. After that, regardless of your findings, this cover operation ends. Jessica understood the time pressure, but felt confident that access to communication logs would allow her to complete the investigation successfully. That evening, while other recruits participated in evening training exercises, Jessica used Blake's access codes to review 3 years of communication logs for personnel with access to recruit information. The patterns she discovered confirmed her suspicions about the identity of the security leak. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez had been selling recruit information to foreign intelligence services for over 2 years. His communication patterns showed regular contact with known enemy assets, and his bank records revealed payments that corresponded exactly with successful enemy targeting of Marine recruits. More disturbing, Rodriguez had specifically requested access to Jessica Kane's file, suggesting that her cover had been partially compromised before the medical inspection revealed her tattoo. The evidence was overwhelming and would support prosecution for treason, espionage, and violation of numerous military security protocols. But Jessica wanted to document Rodriguez in the act of selling information, which would require 1 more day of maintaining her cover. She prepared a comprehensive report for Blake, outlining her findings and recommending immediate arrest of Rodriguez while requesting permission to conduct one final evidence-gathering operation. The next morning, Jessica reported to Blake's office for what appeared to be a background investigation interview, but was actually a mission briefing for the final phase of her operation. "Captain," Blake said after reviewing her report, "this evidence is conclusive. Rodriguez has been selling recruit information to enemy agents for over 2 years. Sir, I'd like permission to document him in the act of selling my information. It would provide additional evidence and potentially identify his foreign contacts." Blake considered the request carefully. "The risk is significant. If Rodriguez suspects your real identity, you could be walking into a trap." "Sir, I've been walking into traps for 5 years. This one just happens to be wearing a Marine uniform." Blake approved the operation, with the understanding that Rodriguez would be arrested regardless of whether the final evidence gathering was successful. That evening, Jessica used electronic surveillance equipment to document Rodriguez accessing her recruit file and transmitting information to a contact who intelligence agencies had been tracking for months. The recorded communication provided evidence that would allow prosecution of not just Rodriguez, but the entire enemy intelligence network he'd been supporting. The arrest took place at 0600 the following morning, during what appeared to be a routine barracks inspection. Rodriguez was taken into custody by military police, while Jessica maintained her cover as a confused recruit watching a drill sergeant being arrested for undisclosed reasons. Later that morning, Blake conducted a final interview with Jessica that officially concluded both his background investigation and her undercover operation. "Captain Vasquez," he said once they were alone in his office, "your investigation has exposed a security breach that compromised Marine operations for over 2 years. The evidence you gathered will support prosecution of Rodriguez and dismantling of an enemy intelligence network that targeted American military personnel." Jessica was satisfied with the mission's success, but recognized that her cover identity would have to be retired permanently. "Sir, what happens to Jessica Kane?" "Jessica Kane will be transferred to advanced training with a notation that her background investigation revealed prior service that qualifies her for accelerated promotion. Captain Vasquez will return to Unit 731 with a commendation for successful completion of a critical counterintelligence operation." Jessica appreciated the elegant solution that allowed both identities to conclude their roles successfully. "Sir, what about the harassment I documented during the investigation?" Blake's expression grew serious. "Thompson and Martinez will face disciplinary action for conduct that violated Marine Corps standards. Your investigation exposed more than just espionage. It revealed training protocols that need immediate reform." Over the following weeks, the security leak investigation led to policy changes that protected recruit information and improved training standards throughout Marine Corps boot camps. Jessica's documentation of harassment led to disciplinary actions that sent a clear message about professional conduct expectations. But the most significant change was the recognition The traditional assumptions about recruit capabilities and backgrounds could no longer be taken for granted. The teenager who looked like she belonged in a sorority house had turned out to be one of the most dangerous operatives in the American military. Captain Elena Vasquez returned to Unit 731 with a reputation for undercover work that exceeded even her combat accomplishments. She'd spent 3 weeks being called Princess and Barbie while conducting an investigation that protected Marine operations and exposed enemy intelligence networks. The tattoo that had blown her cover became a reminder that sometimes the most innocent appearances hide the most extraordinary capabilities. And sometimes the person being harassed knows exactly how to fight back. They're just waiting for the right moment to reveal their true nature. For Jessica Kane, that moment came when Commander Blake saw the ink on her back and realized he was looking at someone who'd achieved everything he'd aspired to reach. For Captain Elena Vasquez, it was just another successful mission in a career built on being underestimated by people who thought they knew what a hero looked like. Sometimes the most dangerous secrets are hidden beneath the most innocent appearances. And sometimes the person enduring harassment is gathering evidence that will change everything about the people doing the harassing. The drill sergeants who called her Princess never learned that they'd been insulting someone who could have ended their military careers with a single demonstration of her real capabilities. They only knew that the pretty blonde recruit they'd been harassing suddenly became off limits after a mysterious background investigation. But Captain Elena Vasquez knew the truth. Sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate retaliation. It's patient investigation that exposes everyone who thought they were safe to abuse someone they considered weak. 3 weeks of being called Barbie had led to arrests, policy changes, and disciplinary actions that protected future recruits from the harassment she'd endured. Her tattoo had blown her cover, but it had also marked the beginning of accountability for people who'd forgotten that Marines are supposed to protect each other, not prey on perceived weakness. Have you ever discovered that someone you underestimated was actually far more capable than you imagined? Sometimes the person who seems most vulnerable is actually gathering evidence that will change everything about the people who think they have power over them. 6 months after the investigation concluded, Jessica received an encrypted message through channels that only Unit 731 operatives could access. The intelligence network that Rodriguez had been feeding information to had been completely dismantled across 3 continents. 12 enemy agents had been arrested, 15 safe houses had been raided, and an entire foreign intelligence operation targeting American military personnel had been neutralized. But perhaps more importantly, the policy changes implemented as a result of her investigation had transformed recruit training protocols throughout the Marine Corps. Sexual harassment during boot camp had decreased by 87%, and new oversight procedures ensured that drill sergeants faced immediate consequences for inappropriate conduct. Commander Blake had been promoted to colonel and assigned to lead a new program focused on identifying and preventing security breaches in military training facilities. His experience working with Jessica had convinced him that traditional assumptions about personnel capabilities were not just wrong, they were dangerous. The most valuable lesson, Blake wrote in his final report, was learning that our enemy's greatest advantage isn't superior technology or better training. It's our willingness to underestimate people based on their appearance rather than their capabilities. Thompson and Martinez had been transferred to administrative duties after disciplinary hearings that resulted in formal reprimands and mandatory sensitivity training. Both men requested transfers to different bases rather than continue serving under commanders who now questioned their professional judgment. The recruits who had witnessed Jessica being called Princess and Barbie never learned the full truth about her identity, but they observed the dramatic change in how drill sergeants treated female recruits after the mysterious investigation. Word spread quietly through training platoons that harassment of female Marines had consequences that extended far beyond immediate disciplinary action. Jessica's real achievement wasn't just exposing Rodriguez or protecting classified information, it was proving that the most effective counterintelligence operations often require operatives who can endure personal humiliation while maintaining mission focus. Her willingness to be called degrading names for 3 weeks had prevented enemy forces from targeting American Marines for years to come. Years later, when Jessica was promoted to major and assigned to train the next generation of Unit 731 operatives, she would often tell recruits about the importance of patience in deep cover operations. "The enemy will always underestimate you if you let them," she would explain. "But the moment you prove them wrong should be the moment you've gathered enough evidence to destroy their entire operation. Never reveal your capabilities until you can use them to achieve total victory." The tattoo that had blown her cover became a teaching tool for demonstrating the challenges of maintaining classified identities in environments where physical examinations were mandatory. New Unit 731 operatives learned advanced techniques for concealing identifying marks while maintaining cover identities that could withstand intensive scrutiny. But Jessica kept one memento from her time as a Marine recruit, the name tag that read Kane J. She wore it during training exercises as a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous operatives are the ones who look like they don't belong in the military at all. The story of the recruit with the classified tattoo became legend within special operations communities, though the details remained classified at the highest levels. What wasn't classified was the lesson. Never assume that the person being harassed doesn't have the power to fight back. They might just be waiting for the right moment to prove that they're far more dangerous than anyone imagined. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.